Jeez, it's been over a year since I've made any notable progress to a Woogie 2. Anyway, movies. Breathe. No, not that Breathe. Is a small scope post-apocalyptic thriller with a survival bunker of two strong, independent women of colors being intruded by three of the dumbest, most incompetent, socially inept characters to ever grace the big screen. The decisions they make in every single scene is so impulsive and idiotic that it's probably exactly what I would do in a situation like that. But everything works out in the end. The evil white people die, and the main characters go to their bunker, which just so happens to be full of very kind and friendly people of color. And now that they've been ethnically cleansed, they can work together to rebuild the planet's plant life, even though they've already established that every animal is dead, so that would be impossible.
You're not going to break my mind.
The Ice Age Adventures of Megamind is yet another big IP given the low-budget, straight-to-streaming resurrection, and despite the unfathomably low reception it got, it's really no worse than any of the other various side series DreamWorks shat out on the streaming platforms. I can guarantee that the average child would eat this up if it wasn't for the excessive memeing. It's just run-of-the-mill bad. Don't act like DreamWorks' TV division has ever been anything better.
Give me a sponge, baby, Sandy.
Watching the SpongeBob movies is definitely the fastest way to experience the quality drop the show suffered in the last 20 years, which is only fitting that the latest film, Saving Bikini Bottom, is by far the worst of them all. SpongeBob tags along despite this being the official Sandy Cheeks movie, and he's as obnoxious as ever. He's only here because realistically the kids are only tuning in to see him. Sorry, first brave female to direct a SpongeBob film. And due to all the characters being cardboard cutouts of their former selves, he just laughs at every single line of dialogue because he's the character with the iconic laugh. That's what he does. It has the occasional live-action charm seen in the Patchy the Pirate episodes, but everything beyond that is just embarrassing. No one likes modern SpongeBob except Redditors. Let it die.
Get out of my freaking pool!
Night Swim is a supernatural horror film with a twist. Instead of a house being haunted, it's a pool. I pretty much told you everything you need to know. Just picture a supernatural horror movie in your head. It has the exact twists, lame jump scare mind games, and sound design you heard 100 times before. Alright, keep that image in your head, but have it in a pool. This was the very first movie to be released in 2024, which makes all the more sense. Borderlands was not the worst movie of all time, and it's not even close to being the worst movie based on a video game. Now, I've barely played any of them, so I watched this as more of a standalone film, and it's a lot easier to be fair when you're not a fanboy raging. With that said, yes, it's bad. It's nothing but another action comedy to add to the ever-growing infection in the modern movie climate, checking everything off the list without a single ounce of subtlety or originality. I'm pretty sure the reviews would be more middling if they ditched the license entirely. Probably would have made more money, too.
Thank you for putting me in a piece of shit god-awful movie.
I'm generally curious how many of these Netflix original films would have been made at all if it weren't for the streaming daddies and the endless amount of money they have to waste. And now that I think about it, how do they make the money back? How would they even calculate it? Do they consider the film $15 richer if it's the first thing someone watches with a subscription? Supposedly, Netflix's original films and shows often have a budget of over $100 million, so I doubt films like The Union are even close to being worth the trouble. I swear to God, Netflix makes 50 buddy comedies every year, and out of the ones I've seen, these buddies have by far the least chemistry. At most, Netflix does the bare minimum in that department, but let's just say this is not their best work. I can't wait until they make a slightly worse version of this movie next year, except they replace the leads with Greg German and Bob Gunton.
Monster sad.
I'm sure Monster can wait till Monday.
Monster been waiting 3 weeks.
Monster Summer is a family horror film that really disservices itself with its PG-13 rating. It's definitely not intended for teenagers with its Goosebumps level cheese. Not to say it's as bad as the Goosebumps movie released last year. It's probably competent enough for stupid kids to enjoy it. And I'm all for making family-friendly horror movies like they did back in the 80s. The kiddos deserve to feel cool and edgy without losing their innocence. There's a scene at the beginning where a witch licks blood off of a piece of glass. That is the only part that justifies the rating, and it has nothing to do with the plot. It could have easily been removed to get the good old PG, which I assume was what they wanted with a lame-ass name like Monster Summer. Yes, the movie sucked. I'd rather talk about its rating.
Don't have a grud moment.
I'm usually pretty positive to modern Nick Cage movies. Most of the time, it takes the average at best scripts handed to him and gives it his all to make it work. He turns 4s into 5s, 5s into 6s, and in that way, it truly makes him the king of B-movies. However, Arcadian is definitely not one of the examples. Not only is he sidelined in the second half, but the character in general is kind of boring. And all that leaves you with is a basic post-apocalyptic creature feature with cheesy teen romance. The design of the monsters are pretty cool, but the low budget definitely shows with how they're almost never on camera at the same time as the characters. The couple of times they are look pretty rough, so they only did the bare minimum to keep people from thinking they were the teenagers all along.
So fat. When she put her hand in Jeffy the puppet,
He got diabetes!
Argyle is a pseudo-intellectual, twist-bloated spy thriller while at the same time attempting to be a silly, lighthearted quirkfest. Oh, Bryce Dallas Howard is woefully miscast as an unstoppable athletic fat ass. No, I'm sorry, badass. There's a plot twist every 5 minutes, and I mean every 5 minutes, including after the film ends, because there's an after-credit scene that reveals that this takes place in the Kingsman universe. Ha! Gotcha! You thought you were watching an original IP that wasn't yet another attempt at setting up a cinematic universe starring Henry Cavill, John Cena, and Samuel Jackson. They are on the poster after all, but no, they all have like 8 minutes of screen time combined. Wait, Samuel Jackson? Wasn't he already a different character in Kingsman? Nah, who cares? Look at the cat. Movie watchers love cats. Written by Jason Fox.
That's it! The moon is really starting to piss me off!
Rebel Moon Part 2 was worse than I expected. I can't think of a single time where the second part of a back-to-back film production was actually better, and yet I still expected this to be. I guess I thought since A Child of Fire was so underwhelming, this must be where it truly finds its footing. I was very wrong. This almost makes Part 1 look good. Everything Zack Snyder is known for is cranked up to 11, like it's a parody of his own work. How can this guy be so unaware? If is the latest film by John Krasinski of A Quiet Place fame, and this time around he decided to be not original. He claimed that this is like a live-action Pixar movie. No. It only is in concept because there are living things that society doesn't know are alive, but direction-wise, it's a British picture book adaptation at best. This is one of those films that attempts the slow burn, where the very slow first 90 minutes is all supposed to be worth it once the plot twist is revealed at the end, but it doesn't even answer half the questions one would have of this poorly thought out universe. So if this is Pixar, then it must be modern Pixar attempting to imitate who they once were.
Has long loading times, a lot of glitches, but if you're a true Sonic fan, you'll know what I mean.
Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is, surprise surprise, just as stupid as the last two, except this time it's directly basing its story off of a game. And despite that game currently being rated D10+, they still had to pussify it. A child gets shot by an evil military, which is the driving force behind the revenge plot? No, actually it was an accidental explosion that killed her. It was a mistake, you see? Sonic and the gang watches the execution tape of Eggman's grandpappy? No, actually he's still alive and 110. I can't honestly say I was expecting them to make a movie called Sonic the Hedgehog 3 edgy, but it would definitely be more interesting that way. However, they'd still have to recast Sonic with someone who doesn't have the single worst voice in all of Hollywood before they could even dream of making it to B tier.
I'm going to catch ghosts.
Ghostbusters Frozen Empire was a sequel that I can confidently say with no exaggeration that very little people wanted. There's always that one guy. When Afterlife spewed member berries for 2 hours while pretending it was some sort of artistic tribute to the least popular Ghostbuster, people got their fix of nostalgic tear-jerking, but this one decided to have its serious moments as well, without the aid of a real death, and it just makes me question things I wouldn't have if it was a full-on comedy like the originals. Like, what's the deciding factor on if a ghost is gonna be a silly dumb blob monster or a sympathetic lesbian humanoid that speaks full English? Oh, apparently the director of the original died. This was made in honor of him. Anyone? No one? Who cares? Look at the cat. Movie watchers love cats. A Quiet Place Day 1 is one of the biggest nothing burgers this year. It's a prequel to a movie that had a sequel that already had a prequel within itself. As always, the performances and effects are good, but this time around, that's all it really has going for it. They added a cat because they knew people would be tired of the whole slowly walking around while trying not to make noise shtick, so they had to implement some kind of key set to dangle, but it is so poorly thought out that I instantly stopped taking it seriously as opposed to the second part where it took at least an hour in. Not only is this the only cat that never makes any noise, but it's also perfectly fine and chill with any possible things the characters come across. Loud noise? Not jumped. Being held while your owner is running for her life? Perfectly chill. Your holder forcibly pulling you underwater as he jumps into the ocean? It's okay, I'll just hold my breath.
Welcome to space.
Spaceman was disappointing. No, not that Spaceman. Or that Spaceman. I'm all for letting Adam Sandler show off his emotional talent, but this time I think it would have helped to be a bit more lighthearted. I mean, it's about a freaking space spider helping a man with his marriage. I think it could have made it a little less melodramatic. It had good visuals, and I was into it for a bit, but not enough happens to keep you entertained, and a lot that does happen takes you out more and more with its bad writing.
From MB!
Twisters is apparently a sequel in name only to a film I've never seen, and I felt no need to watch it first because I've heard time and time again that has nothing to do with it, but I'm not so sure about that. I've watched sequels to films I've never seen before, and my experience felt pretty similar to that. It seems like there's some context I'm not in on to better establish the film's world, or maybe I simply wasn't into it. That's always a possibility. I could watch the original to find out, but I've yet to see a good movie about Twisters, so I don't feel like it.
Dude, shut up. You do this every Christmas. You're gonna wake Zach up.
RedOne is the latest attempt to adapt Christmas lore into an action movie, but this time, they released it in November. Gee, I wonder why it flopped. It's very clearly trying to be a Marvel movie with its self-aware sense of humor and big CGI battles, but for some reason I don't seem to mind it as much. I think it's because no matter how dumb the exposition gets, the characters still say it with a straight face. I can tell the writers know it's stupid, but the characters don't. Well, except the dad, but he comes around. I also appreciate how it doesn't even attempt to set up any sequels. This is better than Sonic 3, eat me!
Our testicles! Our testicles? Does that mean you have 4 of them? Or just 1 or 2?
The Venom trilogy is a quality roller coaster. The first was okay, the second was poopy, and the newest entry into the copyright I'm not touching you trilogy is a guilty pleasure. This one definitely stands beside the other enjoyable CGI nonsense franchises like Transformers and Fast and Furious. They introduced new lore and rules that makes the last 2 people that were actually trying to follow all of it give up, but no matter how stupid it gets, it still tries to make you abruptly cry at seemingly random, because remember, this is The Last Dance. It even has a Furious 7 style montage ending, and it's very unintentionally funny. How can they be self-aware enough to make Venom act more and more retarded every film, but not self-aware enough to realize that no one is taking this seriously?
Happy? No, I can't tie my shoes! What?
Long Legs was a missed opportunity, mainly because that's one of Nick Cage's best performances, and not much else. It's a detective thriller with supernatural elements, but they're very underutilized. Sure, the build-up can be slow like every other detective movie, but if you're gonna add sinister forces into the mix, I'm gonna expect the third act to be a little more flashy. Or at the very least have a conclusive narrative. That ending sucked.
I'm no daddy's girl.
Damsel. No, not that Damsel. It's a survival horror take on the fantasy genre, and judging by the name and that really lame opening monologue, I assumed it was going to be annoyingly feminist, and while it did have a couple of moments where it makes sure you know she's a badass, it was never close to anything Disney level, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it. It's very cheesy and not actually good, so I'm not going to put it any higher, but it has a talking dragon while still taking itself very seriously. How can you say no to that? And the woman who plays it is even trying to do the Gorilla Steve voice. First off, I'm flattered, but you're trying too hard. You're supposed to fake burp while talking, yes, you got that part down, but you're trying too hard to make it sound cartoonishly villainous. Having the burp talking stay monotone makes it that much more powerful, and I think she missed the point. Oh well.
I think I'm going to need some new underpants.
Copy that. Noted for the next supply drop.
Atlas is yet another copy-paste sci-fi epic taking advantage of the recent upsurge in AI relevance, but with a twist! It steals practically everything from Titanfall 2. But because of that, it manages to have that over-serious, cliche-filled cheese that I love to see in these trying times. Way too many films that are cheesy also just so happen to be boring, and even more of them attempt to be a self-aware MCU quip fest that uses it as a critic shield. This is the perfect balance of cheese and super seriousness you'd find something like Samaritan or Damsel. It even had a few unironically good moments. Very few. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare was made by the guy that made that Uncle movie, which makes a lot of sense. I pretty much feel the exact same way about it. It's pretty basic and doesn't have very much for you to remember it by, but it was well acted, well shot, and I like the soundtrack. I'm pretty sure over 90% of it's made up, but it's pretty lighthearted throughout, so it doesn't come off as phony or pretentious as something like Sound of Freedom. It was okay, moving on.
Do it. Do it.
Carry On is an evil person forcing a normal person to do things he doesn't want to, or else thriller. There's been so many movies like this, I might as well give it a name. So, as you can imagine, this does nothing new with the formula. Of course, you can't have a non-horror movie have a non-happy ending, so I'd imagine writing a script like this without a bunch of bullshit that gives the protagonist the upper hand would be close to impossible. So I don't let that ruin the fun. This is the best Netflix original this year. Take that as you will.
Just 'cause I'm a guy doesn't mean I don't cry. I'll cry in front of you.
The Fall Guy is a girly action rom-com where Ryan Gosling, despite being in his 40s, still has the cutesy, sensitive teenage schoolboy mentality that makes all the grandmas in the world oogle and ah. The love story, and really any other moment that tries to be emotional, is really cheesy. The couple of meta moments are very unneeded as well, but all that's made up for by the spectacle of the action scenes. There's a trademark vehicle fight done with an actual vehicle, there's a heavily stylized fight where Ryan's on hallucinogens, and of course it all ends with an explosive finale, and it all looks really good. It is kind of ironic that Ryan Gosling doesn't do all of his stunts, even though he plays a stunt man, but he does do some of them, which is good enough for the lowered standards of the reviewers. I usually don't care this much, but he plays a stunt man. Don't want to take too much of a risk cuffing up that pretty face.
That tooth just won't come out.
Hey, Daddy, look, my tooth came out!
Another Godzilla X Kong comic dub was advertised by its creator as giving the fans more of what they want, being self-aware that no one cares about the poopy human characters and their awful acting, while at the same time openly saying that they're only going to partially fix it. I understand that they don't want to make an entirely dialogueless movie. As awesome as it would be, that's far too artsy to be the certain success that it is, but the people could have been sidelined to exposition dumpers and nothing more. As it is, a good half of the runtime and story is dedicated to them, and sure, they are just exposition dumpers at the end of the day, but they also attempt shoehorning them into the overall narrative, and that's a shame. There's a good 20 minutes in the middle that doesn't have a single spoken line, and that's where it shines. The boring parts aren't as mindlessly nauseating as the monster parts are mindlessly awesome, so I'd say it's above average overall. The Wild Robot is the latest must-see masterpiece of animation, according to Girls and Girly Boys that doesn't know how the food chain works. Dang, who knew an animated film that's name is not saying could be Oscar bait? The story takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where a robot learns about love. Stop me if you heard this one before. Robots having hearts has gotten really old for me, and it's even more cliche now that the industry is trying to convince its audience that AI is good. It's not a bad movie, even though I'm only saying bad things about it. The problem is that people treating any animated film with even the slightest bit of emotional undertone like it's the highest form of art has also gotten old. Oh, would you look at that? It has that video gamey look that The Last Wish had. That means it's a visual masterpiece. You guys are so easy.
I'm sadness.
I'm anger.
I'm disgust.
I'm poo.
Inside Out 2 is very sequel-y, but due to it being a modern Disney movie, that's better than what could be said for most sequels. The emotional beats are all too familiar, it doesn't expand the concept in any notable way, and it practically spells out all the metaphors, but it's still entertaining. I guess it takes 10 flops in a single year for them to finally attempt decent quality again.
Jack Black. Jack Black. Jack Black.
Kung Fu Panda 4 is an animated kids movie that crosses off every animated kids movie checkmark off the animated kids movie checklist, but basic story aside, the action was very impressive, and it made me realize something. Most modern fight scenes are fake anyway, but they'll still attempt to trick you with either stunt doubles or CGI, which is just animation at that point, come on. But when an action movie is entirely animated, they don't have the limitations that a partially fake action movie has. There's no limits to how the characters can move, there's no constant cuts, and you don't have to position the camera to hide the fake punches. Ever since the Mario movie had way better action than anyone expected, I've noticed other animated movies putting more effort into that department. And sure, the Kung Fu Panda movies have always had fight scenes, but I think they're the best they've been.
You're only as old as you feel.
Thelma is a sweet, wholesome little comedy about cute old people. A lot of the time it functions as an action movie, except the set pieces and scenarios are all toned down to accompany a 90-year-old woman. Even though that is pretty funny, that by itself can't make a movie, so thankfully there's also some more serious, heartfelt moments, and they mix together pretty well. It's nothing amazing, but it doesn't need to be. Check it out, it's cute. The ending could have been better, though. But it didn't need to be.
I love you, Daddy.
Dune Part 2 is a huge improvement over the original, mainly in how it's not boring and lifeless. I rewatched the original in hopes I'd like it more due to there being very little that came out that month, but nope, it's still the same snail-paced angst I remember it being. And it's not even the believable angsty or even the fun angsty, it's just lame. Despite this, I still watched Part 2 in theaters, and I didn't regret it. Along with the characters showing actual emotion in this one, it also has balls. And it better, because it still pulls the whole this is only the beginning crap the first one did, but this time around I wouldn't mind there being another one, thanks to the balls.
My, what a happy day.
Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes was a film I was going to like by default. It's a post-apocalyptic epic with flawlessly animated apes. Of course I was hyped for it. It delivered on the bare minimum set by the high standards of the series, and it was good, but nothing beyond that. I was satisfied by its world building and spectacle, but also underwhelmed by its story. While I do like the characters because they're apes, the writing itself is fairly safe, and the conflicts aren't really challenged in any thought-provoking way. Maybe it's because I've seen too many movies since, but I remember being a lot more into the story of the first three. I wrote that review like it wasn't gonna finish off the video. I assumed there would be better movies later in the year. So overall, that year kinda sucked. Maybe I'm just slowly getting sick of movies, I don't know.